Prismatic Hunter easily has the best kit out of all three classes, and that means we can pair up a lot of different exotics with the subclass. For this build video, I wanted to take the Deadfall super available on the Prismatic subclass and pair that up with a classic exotic, the Orpheus Rig. Now, Orpheus Rigs are the exotic boots that you can get on the Hunter, and its perk, Uncanny Arrows, provides ability energy for each target tethered by Deadfall anchors. Mobius Quiver has an additional shot. The Mobius Quiver portion's out the window. The main thing is having that ability energy back from just the one super. Essentially, as long as you launch the super into a bunch of enemies, every target that gets tethered and you kill is going to give you ability energy. And the reason I wanted to try this on Prismatic is because there are so many benefits on the Prismatic subclass that you could take advantage of in regards to your weapons and ability regen outside of the super that I wanted to test it out. And I think I found what works really well with this. Now, under the subclass, obviously for the super, go ahead and toss on the Shadow Shot Deadfall because that's how we're even going to take advantage of the Orpheus Rigs. But for our abilities, I'm going with Gambler's Dodge, so when I dodge near a target, it's going to give me my melee energy back. I like Triple Jump for movement, but you can use what you like. For the melee, I'm opting for the Snare Bomb for the weakened portion because that'll pair up with some artifact perks, which we'll talk about later. And for the grenade, I'm going with the Grapple, not only because it counts as a grenade, but you can also do the Grapple melee, which does something very cool. Now, for aspects, the first one is going to be Stylus Executioner, so defeating a target affected by any elemental debuff, light or dark, is going to grant you invisibility and true sight, and then after performing a Stylus Execution, your next melee attack while invisible weakens targets. The second aspect that I really like is Gunpowder Gamble. So defeat targets with abilities, elemental debuff damage, or solar weapons to charge up an improvised solar explosive, and that'll replace your grenade after you get all the stacks, and then you can throw the explosive out and you can shoot it and it'll cause an ignition. Now, if you still wanted to use the classic combination blow with Gambler's Dodge, Winter Shroud, and Stylus Executioner, basically allowing for that stacking melee damage, getting health back, going invisible after every melee kill, you can totally do so, but the benefit of having the Smoke Bomb is going to be better, especially when it comes to the artifact portion. And to be honest, Gunpowder Gamble is really the only other aspect here that I like using with this setup, and it's extremely powerful. Out of the 21 fragments, these are the 5 that I like using in particular. First up being Facet of Hope. While you have an elemental buff, your class ability regenerates more quickly, and with Facet of Balance, when we rapidly defeat targets with light damage, it's going to give us melee energy, and when we rapidly defeat targets with darkness damage, it's going to give us grenade energy. Essentially, with these two, we can have our ability uptime even faster, but if you did want to replace these with something like Facet of Sacrifice or Devotion, you can totally do so. Now, the third fragment is very interesting, Facet of Bravery. So defeating targets with grenade final blows grants volatile rounds to your void weapons, and defeating targets with powered melee final blows grants unraveling rounds to your strand weapons. Now, the very cool thing here is that if you decide to use the grapple melee, it actually procs both the volatile rounds and the unraveling rounds for those weapons. So I will be using a void and a strand weapon, and I'll talk about your options when we get to that portion, but it's extremely cool that you can proc both of these with just the grapple melee and getting a kill. And what I figured out as well is that since Gunpowder Gamble counts as a grenade, when you get a kill with it, it can actually proc those volatile rounds again, which is neat. For the last two fragments, we have Facet of Protection. While surrounded by combatants, you are more resistant to incoming damage. While Transcendent, the effect is increased. That's a plus 10 to strength. Then we have Facet of Purpose. So when you pick up an Orb of Power, it's going to give you a buff based on the damage type of your super. And since we're using a Void super, every Orb of Power that we pick up is going to give us that Void Overshield. Now, for your artifact perks, in the first column for weapon champion mods, you can use what you like. In the second column, again, these are all benefits to origin trait perks for the current weapons, which are Pale Heart, the new raid weapons, the reprised Saint weapons, and the new seasonal weapons. So if you decide to use some of those weapons, definitely look into some of these origin trait perks. I am going to be using the Call, which is the new strand special rocket assisted sidearm, and so having winning hand on is definitely a benefit to me. In the third column, there's really only 2 that I like. Number 1 being Elemental Siphon. So rapid final blows with a kinetic weapon or a weapon matching your equipped super will create an elemental pickup that matches your equipped super. So since we have the Void super and we're using Void weapons, it'll create a Void Breach, and when you pick up that Void Breach, it'll actually give you class ability energy back, which is nice. Now, the second one in the third column that I like is Threaded Blast. So destroying a tangle with a strand weapon creates a larger and more damaging explosion, and let me tell you, it really does. It's absolutely disgusting how much damage it does. Now, for the fourth and fifth columns, these ones are essential. First up being Void Hegemony. So when we have that Void or Prismatic subclass equipped, defeating weakened targets provides a small Void Overshield. Again, this can be great for survivability. But on top of that, with Expanding Abyss, Void sources deal increased damage to weakened targets. So if a target is weakened, any Void damage is just going to be improved on top of that. Now, outside of these two, I definitely like Radiant Orb. So while you have the Solar or Prismatic subclass equipped, picking up an Orb of Power makes you Radiant. If there's a way you can get amplified, I would recommend putting on galvanic armor, but at current, there's no way to get it with this setup. But again, galvanic armor is very good. And lastly, shield crush. While you have woven mail, frost armor, or a void overshield, your melee recharges faster and deals increased damage, and while you're amplified or radiant, your grenade recharges faster and deals increased damage. If you did want to switch this out for something like transference, you totally can. Since I already mentioned weapons, let's talk about what some of your options are. First up in the kinetic slot, I would recommend a strand weapon. If you wanted to go with these special weapons, I would recommend the Call. This is the new rocket assisted special sidearm. This thing is disgusting. I have enhanced slice and desperate measures on this thing. It hits like a truck, and with all of our abilities, desperate measures is just going to make this thing even more powerful. But honestly, any special strand weapon will work. I have the sword breaker adept with 1-2 punch. I also have a scatter signal from last season. But if you want to go with a primary weapon, again, any strand primary will work. Again, I have this crafted Rufus Fury here. I have a decent Imminence SMG from the new raid. Any strand primary will work. For your energy weapons, it actually gets a little more interesting because we have a couple of options. To be honest, any void PvE weapon is going to work here. As you can see, I have an enhanced recluse, subsistence frenzy. It's very good, but what I would recommend in the primary department is graviton lance. This thing is absolutely destructive. With this perk, black hole, second shot of the burst rips a hole through space-time, doing high damage and recoil with no fall off. It also has hammerforged rifling with accurized rounds and fitted stock. With its trait cosmology, kills with the weapon cause enemy targets to detonate and spawn void projectiles that track targets. These can also benefit from the volatile rounds from the subclass, which is just absolutely disgusting. You literally just wipe out an entire field of enemies with one shot of this thing. And with its catalyst, you also gain Vorpal Weapon and an Overshield perk, where essentially whenever you break the shield of a combatant, it's going to give you an overshield. So as you can see, when I use Graviton Lance, I pair that up with the Call in the primary slot. But there is another exotic special weapon that I would recommend in the energy slot if you want to use it, which is Buried Bloodline. This thing is absolutely disgusting this season because it can take advantage of some stuff on the artifact. So with this perk, Hungering Quarrel, double fire striking bolts, landing bolts leeches health from the target. We also have Hard Launch with Flared Magwell and Hand Laid Stock, but its trait perk, Violent Reanimation. Multiple final blows with this weapon grant Devour to the wielder. Now, once you have Devour, as long as you can chain kills, you get full health every time and extra grenade energy. So that means we can get that grapple back even faster for even more volatile rounds and unraveling rounds. But the main thing here is the catalyst. So while Devour is active, this weapon weakens on hit. So once you have Devour and you shoot a target and you weaken them, again, with Void Hegemony, as long as you defeat a weakened target, it's going to give you an overshield, and any void damage to that target is going to be increased when they're weakened. So guess what? After I weaken that target or a boss or a higher level enemy, all I have to do is whip out my Void Heavy weapon and they get destroyed instantaneously. So when I use my Buried Bloodline, I just pair that up with a strand primary weapon to take advantage of Threaded Blast on the artifact. And like I said, for heavy weapons, honestly, any heavy weapon will do. As you can see, I have an enhanced edge transit, envious assassin, bait and switch. This thing is fantastic. If you have a Doom Petitioner from last season for precision damage, recon precision instrument, if you have a decent falling guillotine for sword damage or overload sword, again, that's totally fine. But honestly, any void heavy weapon will do. Before we dive into armor mods, let's talk about what stats to look for. So first up, definitely focus on resilience. We talk about that every video. Try to have tier 10 100 resilience. It's a 30% damage reduction, and you definitely want that for harder PvE activities. Next, I would focus on discipline. Discipline is tied to how fast we can get that grenade back, and I want that grapple back as much as possible to take advantage of both the volatile and unraveling rounds, because once you have both of those and you kill the targets with that, Stylus Executioner procs. Remember, it's by any debuff. So once I get those proc, I can continue having the cycle of invisibility. Outside of discipline, I would focus on mobility next. Mobility is tied to how fast we can get the dodge back for the hunter. Again, that's tied to the class ability. So the higher your mobility, the faster we can get that dodge back. There are some ways we can get it back, obviously, with the subclass and armor mods I'll talk about, but mobility is going to be your next bet. But like I said, resilience is the main one here. For mods on the helmet, I like Harmonic Siphon, so those rapid void weapon final blows will create orbs of power for me. I also like Dynamo, so it'll reduce my super cooldown when I use my class ability near targets. And then lastly, I like Special Ammo Finder, so I can have more special ammo for my Call or my Buried Bloodline if I decide to use that. But you can also switch this out for Double Dynamo if you'd like, Heavy Ammo Finder, anything like that. On the gauntlets, I liked Impact Induction and Focusing Strike. So when I deal damage with my melee, it's going to give me a reduction to my grenade cooldown and my class ability cooldown. Now, if you wanted to run double Impact Induction, I think that's totally fine. If you wanted to run double Focusing Strike, that's totally fine. If you wanted to include the harmonic reloader in here, so you get faster reload for those void weapons. You can totally do so, but I would highly recommend at least one impact induction and focusing strike here. On the chest piece, I like harmonic reserve, so I get more ammo for my void weapons. This is really good if I decide to use buried bloodline with my void heavy, which means I get more ammo for both of those. And then whatever resistance mods that you want to use, depending on what activity you're doing, again, you can switch those out however you like. On the boots, I'm rocking recuperation, so I'll get health back each time I pick up an orb of power. Now, if you're using buried bloodline, you get devour. This isn't absolutely necessary. You could switch it out for something like installation, so you get a cooldown to your class ability when you pick up orbs of power, but I like recuperation as a just-in-case thing if I need to get health back. And then I'm rocking double void weapon surge, so your void weapons gain a small bonus to damage while you have any armor charge. Your armor charge now decays over time. Essentially, when you collect orbs of power, you'll gain armor charges. With this build, you can have a maximum of 3, and with any of these blue mods, it puts a 10-second timer on that. So at 3 armor charges, we get 30 seconds of bonus weapon damage. And lastly, on the class item, I like time dilation, so my decaying armor charge has a longer duration, so the 10 seconds that I mentioned actually gets bumped up to 15 seconds, so at 3 armor charges, we have 45 seconds of that bonus weapon damage. Next, I like Reaper, so after I use my class ability, within 10 seconds, if I get a weapon kill, it'll spawn another orb of power, and I also like Bomber, so it reduces my grenade cooldown when I use my dodge. Now, I will say I like using this build when I'm doing team activities in particular because I can generate orbs for my teammates a lot faster. I can get half the super back, and as long as my teammates are generating orbs as well, I can pretty much have the super back to back. It's decent solo, but there are a lot of really good solo builds for the Hunter already. I like this one a little more for teams in particular. But the one thing I wanted to showcase is how much better Prismatic Hunter is with Orpheus Rig versus the base Void subclass. Yes, base Void subclass is great. You can have Devour from just the fragments and whatnot, and you can go invisible, but most of the stuff that's under the Prismatic subclass, especially Stylus Executioner, as long as you get a kill with any debuff, you're going invisible. So you don't necessarily need to have volatile rounds to take advantage of that. Having Gunpowder Gamble on there as well, also proccing volatile rounds after you get a kill with it, is just absolutely diabolical. There's just so much ability spam with this. There's a way to have Overshield, there's a way to have, you know, Devour. There's just too many benefits with this build that I could not pass up making it. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is my Orpheus Rig Prismatic Hunter build. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm actually going to put the dim link for this build in the description, so if you want to copy everything that I'm using, down to the subclass, the armor mods, the weapons, even the drip if you'd like. That will include shaders and ornaments as well. So if you want to copy all that, test out for yourself, come back to this video and let me know what you like using with this in particular. Trust me, there are plenty of things you can switch out in this build, and I definitely want to know what you like using. In any event, if you enjoyed watching, be sure to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on that bell next to notifications so you don't miss out on any other final shape builds I'm going to be dropping here on the channel. If you didn't know, we live stream here on YouTube and then also over on Twitch. Again, there's going to be the Salvation's Edge raid. There's going to be the new activity to get the exotic class items, the co-op mode. There's going to be plenty of stuff to do. So if you want to hop in for any of that, again, hop in the chat. And then also, if you want to be proactive, join my Discord. Again, people are going to be looking to play activities together. So hop on in. We're also talking about anime, tech, and plenty of other games as well. Lastly, if you want to help support the channel even more so I can continue making this content for you guys, you can always look into becoming a member. If you don't know what a membership is, it's essentially like a Twitch subscription. Again, you're going to get access to the emotes, the monthly badges, and the big thing, which is getting early access to all of my videos. So if you want to look into becoming a member, all you have to do is press the join button next to subscribe, and that'll give you a rundown with all the details you need. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's been your boy. We'll catch you in the next one. Cheers!